Hello.
Hello.
Take two.
Take two.
Did we figure it out? I don't know. We got a new setup going on, and we're sort of
And
experimenting on
you
this first.
like to have it be perfect, which is good. But when you don't know what perfect is and you keep tinkering, that's just
Cannibal
shooting
does
in
not
the
like
dark.
it.
Here we are. We have headphones. We have a new setup, and we've invested and are taking the podcast to the next level, which is exciting.
Where did this come from? Like, why did we? So we have a Rodecaster sort of
That means nothing. People
computer.
don't know
It
what
looks
that
like
means.
it looks like the person in Star Wars that controls like the laser that destroys planets. Kind of like one of those things. And then we have headphones like we're commenting at the NFL.
What's the NFL? Yeah. This came about because I've returned to listening to podcasts more regularly. I made a little shift. I stopped posting to my personal Instagram page, which has been great. And I took away something that I think was not healthy, and I have added something that I think is healthy, and that's selective podcasts. So we've been listening, both of us, to Rich Roll quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was like a reminder of how valuable those like a podcast can be. I mean, and some are informative, and there's different reasons to listen to different podcasts. But in our sphere of like self-help, self-discovery, sharing with people, our own struggles, like sharing in that human experience, it just was such a reminder of like how powerful that is and how much it made an impact on my day, my week. So for me, I do feel like people have that experience listening to our podcast. And we had sort of wondered, like, does it matter? Is this helping anybody? Is this just a waste of everybody's time? But I think what we realize is like, no, it's not. And if that answer is that it's valuable, then let's really make it valuable. And how can we add more value? Well, we can have guests that expand on the experiences we're talking about, that expand on the topics. And so that to me was like a natural next step, because we can only do so much, but facilitating some conversations, people that have had their own experiences with between the ears and mindset, physical, mental, emotional health. I think that seemed like we have so many great people that have had such powerful experiences that it seemed like a natural progression to start having them part of this.
Yes. That's your...
Well, you asked why
No, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's good, because that's like... But I would say generally that's much more external based, like as it relates to the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I see the podcast as a vehicle for the business of between the ears and help, like our mission of helping people, providing value. I see it in that way of like, let's build this arm. Let's not just have it be sort of like let's really solidify it.
Well, let's yeah. My approach to the podcast and needing to approach it is much more from the internal piece. So I needed to really be honest about how I was showing up to the podcast, why I was doing it, and frankly, what the past, we'll say like year and a half or so of it stirred up within me. And there's, the perfection, there's the self-deprecation of no one's listening, it doesn't matter. A lot of that stems to measuring it. And
you mean like how many
listeners
do we have?
Yeah, all of that kind of stuff. But the thing is that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy when you don't try. And so really I was hiding behind, we just plug in the thing and press record, and that's it. And it was kind of that, you know what it was like? It was like that kid in school who doesn't try, because then when they like
Because if they try and they fail,
right? Because there's
then they feel
exposure,
bad. Yeah.
and so I think investing goodness into the podcast, seeking wholesome goodness, service, sharing, putting a voice to our pursuits, involving others, like having that be a wholesome pursuit. The Rich Roll podcast has certainly helped provide inspiration for that as well. And while the past, I don't know, a bunch of the episodes echo the sentiments of Between the Ears, and some of the things we share about, it's like, yeah, these voices, they need to be said. They need to be heard. And, I think providing that in our own right is the return to the authenticity and the intent of the podcast. And so,
So here we are. So this is.
I would like to make it also, if your people are still listening, 6 minutes in, hopefully so. But
you always say that, like.
It's sort of a joke, but seriously, we're figuring out the new gear situation. So if there's volume issues, or if you're like, hey, it's too low, it's too high, like some technical feedback,
sure.
Let us know, because honestly, we don't listen to our own podcast.
So that is our first guest. We're not going to reveal any
so
details, but we do have a guest, and so that first episode with a guest will be the next one after this. So that's exciting. But today we thought it would be a good sort of relaunching explaining kind of where we're going with the podcast, but also it's a year ago, really this week, that we were going into the whole lockdown, shutdown, at least in this area. And now, a year later, almost to the date, there is a feeling of coming out of it. So there's people getting vaccines, there's loosening of some things, some of the restrictions. And those are all great. That's a positive for sure. We want to acknowledge that. But as it relates to mental health, I think we wanted to just address, the awareness of there being a tail on this thing. It's not just you lock the box up, good, done, bury it, moving on. It's really not going to be that simple. And not to be a Debbie Downer or be on negative, just I think the awareness piece is just really important for people.
Yeah, I think so all things we always talk about really boil down to physical, mental, and emotional fitness and or health. And in looking at where we are and where we're going, I think we could probably agree that the physical piece of that, vaccines, death rate, case count, whatever, and we're not going to get into like those types of metrics are going in the right direction. Things are returning, whatever. That's only one leg of the tripod. The mental and the emotional part of the past year plus, we're not like, that's not the thing. It's like a wave that has not had a crest yet.
Arguably, it's not really. Would you even say it's really just beginning? Because there's been this focus on the external, on, we've had something to focus on and point the finger at. And now when in the absence of that, it's going to be like, well, why don't I not feel good? I'm back to normal.
Well, I think some of it is, at the beginning. So 1 year ago, it was, I'm going to limit my exposure to other humans so that I don't contract this alien virus that's killing everybody. Now it's like, hey, it's safe outside, generally speaking. It's more safe. We have vaccines. You can get vaccines. There's this, there's that. Come on back to life. And now I'm going to limit my exposure to this way of living that 6 months ago, everybody was wanting to return to normal. And the mental and emotional blockage that's preventing people from physically engaging in life, that's what we're starting to see. People saying, I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to go back to the office. I don't want to go back to the road. Whether that be for convenience of life in a good way, like hey, I get to spend more time with my family. Yeah, why would you? Or dealing with the fear of what being in a fear-based environment has been for the past year. And so I think that's one of the things now where the other part is the cumulative effect of this thing has not come to a head yet. And you're going to be influenced by the past year. Maybe so you look at what happens over the course of 1 year, and you deal with things every now and then. You know, yeah, okay. And anybody that's been through any long, drawn out fight knows that shit's tiring.
Right.
We've been in this thing for a full on year, in some parts of the world longer, some parts of the country longer, and you've just been in a year-long fight.
Yeah,
the result
the
of
thing
that
is, most people who go through something like that, then there's like a very established, oh, I need a recovery, I need time to whatever that follows it, and usually a one-to-one. But I just feel like nobody's talking about that. Nobody's saying, wow, we're going to need a year to like heal, to come to recover. It's just on to the next. And especially, not to pick on this area, but in the Northeast, it's just move on and forget it. Like move on, just keep pressing on. And one of the things we've talked about that we've experienced with people is this like paralysis. So like, what do you think that's about? Like people saying, I feel really stuck. I just can't, whether it's people gaining weight, people going to like, just not, I can't get moving. I just don't feel motivated. This like shutdown, like, what do you think that's about? And how do you think it's going to, like, okay, you're free. Now what?
I think it's survival. And I think it's you've been in a fight. You've been in a fight that it's been an endless fight. After it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Then it was we could hold our breath for a month. Then it was like, oh, we need to, and then it was like, Jesus Christ, this thing is never going to go away.
Right.
And so right now, feeling stuck, feeling like you don't have energy to do things, feeling like you lost the interest, right? It used to be, can't wait for restaurants to go out. Now it's like, I don't even care.
Right.
And the apathy comes about, in my opinion, as a result of your energy stores being burned, being spent. Look at nothing, this is no fault of the individual, but how did you build yourself up from an energy standpoint over the past year? Was there any type of reload?
Right.
Okay. And not to make it about the military stuff, but like you just shot an entire magazine and you never reloaded. You didn't reload when there was 5 rounds left. You just emptied out the whole thing and you just did that. And then it's like, hey, I've got nothing left.
Yeah.
Right. You've
also
gone on a cross-country trip and you filled your gas tank once, or you didn't even fill it. You just hopped in, whatever was in the driveway, and then started driving. And some people had a full tank, some people had a quarter tank. Yeah. And now it's like, where are we at? And so I think that when you look at, you have had to survive. There's been, and that's simply pandemic. That's not socioeconomic.
Yeah.
Clashes.
Yeah, all the other
that's
things,
not
the family,
all of that. So I think that's what we're seeing now. And so if you were
so what's not funny, it's not funny at all, but like I do think there was a general feeling of like, I'll worry about it later, kind of one day at a time, which is what you're talking about, like surviving. Like when you're surviving, you're not planning ahead, being proactive, you're just like holding on for dear life. And I'm not judging people either, and we had this experience as well. In my observation, not a judgment, there wasn't this tremendous influx of people saying like, I know I need to like refuel, I need to do the work, I need to meet this thing where it's at by bolstering my own mental health. It wasn't that. Nobody did anything. In fact, there was less done. So what makes us think now, are people going to do anything? That's
the scary part. So that's the part.
So now they're in a total hole, and they never did it before. And so, and then I think just like, when people get overwhelmed with like, if they have a lot of weight to lose, of course, 20, 30, 40 pounds ago, man, I would have had 20, 30, 40 pounds less to have to lose at this point. And now I'm in so much deeper. But you can still start. But my fear is that people are just going to be so overwhelmed that instead of going in towards, okay, let me take a step, let me start, it's just like, what's the fucking point? It's too much.
Yeah, and that's obviously a major concern.
Because there's, one of our friends, there was a recent suicide, a young girl in a school, and it's like, okay, well, how do you explain that? The kids are having hope to go back to school. So by that right, it's like, well, why we're not in the depths of the pandemic? Well, right. I mean, but that's ridiculous if we think that like that's it, like we're coming out of it. That should be less, unfortunately, and it's really sad. And I don't want to say like we're predicting this, but like, would you think that this death toll might be going down, but do you think mental health is going to start declining more?
Okay, so for my master's degree, I'm also interning.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interning in a college's mental health department, mental health and counseling.
Right.
And so I've been on various webinars and trainings and stuff like that.
Right.
Did I talk about this on the last episode?
No.
All right. So Mental Health of America has done 7.5 million screens, online screens, where people go to their website and they basically self-assess and they click in like where they're at. 7.5 million since 2014.
Okay.
All right. So they've been at it, 7 years. So they do about 1 million, 1.5 million a year. It obviously the first few years wasn't as much, but either way. In 2020, they did 2.5 million screens. So that's like nearly 10 times what they've been doing, according to their numbers. The numbers are staggering and are dangerous.
And this was in young people.
This was across the board.
Oh, okay, but you had some statistics for the younger population too.
Yeah. I want to say over 90%, it's like 91% of young people, 11 to 17. This is 11 and 17-year-olds going to a website and entering into it like basically what they feel is wrong with them. Right. Over 90% of them moderate to severe anxiety and depression or depression.
Yeah.
Over half
those
it was 50%. Screened 11 to 17 suicidal ideations. That amounted to over 155,000 11 to 17-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
So compare that to our death, 20% of it ish. It's the number one reason why people were like, hey, this is sort of what's bothering me and this is what's going on, was isolation, loneliness.
Well, it's just like that's not a human, one of the guys was...
Coronavirus, by the way. So 70% said, I'm like isolated or alone. Coronavirus.
The fear of the virus was
25%.
Yeah.
Like it was the lowest of that which they collected data on.
Well, so someone was making the point that all these, when you listen to the words associated with this past year, lockdown, isolation, all these things, that you could easily put those on a list, and it's describing like what it's like to be in prison. Like they're the same set of conditions. And we know people who have friends who haven't left their house. So one of our friends she knows someone that hasn't left her house in a year. And that's not, there's people that have, maybe that's an extreme, but people who have severely restricted any kind of contact and, even the physical. I mean, my mom, she hasn't really had a physical embrace from her family in a year.
Yeah.
And there's an impact. And not that some of that's avoidable. It may not have been, but the awareness of the impact it's going to have. That's what we're saying, is opening our eyes to what's happening, how you're feeling, how you're thinking. And the challenge is that we know that takes practice. So it's not just today I decide, I listened to this podcast. I do want to be aware of how I'm feeling, thinking. So now it's just a light switch. That takes work, and people should absolutely start the work, but just being realistic about it's not just you decide and the next thing you know, you're just super in touch with, oh, wow, yeah, that's because of this and that, and this is what I'm feeling. It's a practice.
When this is, so Man's Search for Meaning should be required reading for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first book we said in the Between the Ears Fitness book club.
Right.
Read. If you haven't read it, read it. If you read it, read it again. It's that good, and it's quick. And the guy who wrote it, Dr. Viktor Frankl, was a psychologist or some sort of wizard in pre-Nazi Germany kind of era. He got rolled up and spent however many years in a variety of concentration camps, to include Auschwitz. And he writes about it, and it's like, I get it. It's not exactly fun reading and all that, but it's real reading.
Yeah.
He tells the story of when they get liberated, how this dream comes true. This is what they've literally held on for dear life to occur. And then they walk out of the gates of Auschwitz or Dachau or whatever they were in. And it wasn't exactly this jubileous celebration. It was like there was anger, there was a whole gamut of emotions. And so thankfully I never obviously spent real experience in captivity. One, it wouldn't happen like that. I mean, you'd be on YouTube in a terrible video. But in SEER,
the training,
which is that prisoner of war torture sort of situation, everybody who's gone through that knows what I'm talking about at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a moment I'll never forget. That's a moment that I'll never experience again either. And while it was thankfully training,
the emotions were real.
Mm-hmm. The thoughts were real. The physical hardship was real. And there's a reason why they take your knives. There's a reason why they send the cadre.
Right, the people that were inflicting the torture away
first. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why they give you a couple days before you go back to base to, return to life, to see your families. There's also a reason why they give you a printout, like you're in 5th grade, to say, okay, take this home to mommy and daddy and show them, like, blah, blah, blah.
Right, like you can't do anything. You can't drive, you can't work out.
Yeah, it was like, look, you just went through this thing. Expect a whole gamut of emotion or of things. Like, don't buy a car. Mm-hmm. Don't make any decisions. Don't make any decisions. Don't expect to be full of love. Yeah. If you know what I mean. And because you just went through this, okay, and that was a month. While that was maybe more physically intensive and targeted psychologically, when you also look at the past year of what was what the environment that we have operated and lived in and tried to survive in, it reminds me of the same thing. Yeah. And so the game, we're on the up and up and we're returning and let's do this. And there's a new president and there's multiple vaccines and we're returning this and that. It's like, that doesn't erase what the fuck just happened. Right. For the past year. And we all need to heal. And that means something different for everybody. But at a minimum, it starts with acknowledging the fact that you just got your shit stuffed in for the past year. You just got destroyed. And it wasn't because you did it to yourself or whatever. Yeah. If you were alive during 2020, you were on the receiving end of some pretty hard blows. Yeah. And acknowledging that, because that's acknowledging your very... the essence of being a human.
And that is the thing. I mean, you can also be grateful and positive about these changes that are coming, of course. Of course. But while also having that awareness of what you've been through. And Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I guess I've noticed, and what's interesting is it's been more recently, and I don't know if that's because of my awareness or my interactions or whatever, but like people are just pissed off for like no reason, or they have such a short fuse. I was pulling in here
Oh my God. I had
to
another one today too.
to the gym the other morning, and it was at 5:40 in the morning. And when I come down that early, I do see these people walking around, like on this main sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I'm aware I wasn't doing anything. I was driving. But I see them coming, and they weren't right about to step off into the driveway part. They were a few feet to go, but I thought I'll just slow down. I have no rush. I don't need to zip in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I slow down. I'm the only car. It's 5:40 in the morning. It's pitch black. And we had one of those interactions where like I stop, they kind of were like trying to have me go, but then we both kind of went at the same time, went to go. So I stopped again. I always feel like yield to the pedestrian. I was like, oh, no, no. And this guy was so pissed off, shaking his head at me. And I'm thinking, now, if I had like cut them off, yeah, of course, like have that reaction. But I'm thinking, do you have no patience? Like we had this little exchange, totally normal. And you're so mad. And I've had that type of silly, and I get it, it's a silly interaction. That type of silly zero tolerance. I guess that's what I'll call it. No tolerance for like anything. And it's like, it's so unnecessary. And so now you have that. And then so what I see is this like continuing to have stress that's, you don't need to have that. It's excess. And just anger towards every other human. It's like, what just happened?
I agree. I agree. And to add another nuance to it, when you are in a state of perpetual survival / threat, right? Mm-hmm. If you're surviving because there's a threat, every type of interaction,
right. You don't have the ability to gauge it. It's just a threat.
Just like, okay, everything is a threat. When everything is a threat, your more primitive self is going to respond in a way that tries to prioritize your chance of survival. Mm-hmm. And while that might not be people running around zombie apocalypse style, mm-hmm. being aware of how we respond, we don't respond actually. We react to things. Yeah. And when we react, we need the reaction
right
in a threat environment, mm-hmm. because it's fast.
Right.
It's
the fast thinking.
Yeah. So it's the fast thinking, and it's prioritizing your survival.
But now it's like the breathing. It's the same thing with breathing. We need breath, like panic breathing when you're literally panicking. But now we've gone to, and this is just humans in general, we've gone to this, like, that's how we breathe all the time because everything's a panic. And it's like, no, it's not. Yeah. I had a thought and then I just lost it. But, yeah, I think that's the piece, that's the awareness. And, when a couple weekends ago, I took like 3 days to really, I hate the word reset. I think that's sort of like a weird thing. Really to like regain some awareness. And I'll say like I have been doing the work. But I do think I had to sort of stop and regain some awareness about like my own self-care, things I know I need to do. And that was really where I stopped some of the, stopping the Instagram, adding the podcast, doing walks, like, and it's hard. It is hard to some of the actions that accompany the self-care. But I did feel like after those 3 days or whatever, some of that, what we're talking about, that reactionary state, that threat state, like it did start to come down. And it was like amazing because it wasn't wasn't even a weekend away. It was, I walked the dogs.
Yeah.
I did Jim's journaling. And I'm not saying these are like fix-alls, and everybody has their own, and we talk about that. Yeah. But something, like just reestablishing those things to kind of like reconnect with myself, feel safe, feel like, okay, I don't have to be in this How can I feel integrated and safe? And what's scary about that is we've done a lot of work, and I don't mean it like this. I still needed that reminder. So people this is foreign to them, it might be a small step, but you got to take some kind of step.
Well, I think the thing with that is, yes, perhaps your threat state kind of came down a little bit.
Right.
But I would also maybe say, and who knows for sure, I would say that not only did your threat state go down, maybe, but I would actually say, what in my opinion, what happened, your energy went up.
Mm-hmm.
You refueled.
Yeah.
You recharged.
I did the reload.
You did the reload.
Yeah.
And you can look at that
mm-hmm.
and say, where's my energy? What brings me energy? What gives me energy? What?
No, where do I use energy and where do I gain energy?
Yeah, what gives me energy?
Right.
What depletes my energy?
Right.
And that's not to say what's good, what's bad.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally different. And good or bad, not a thing. For example, doing a hard workout
depletes. But it's
you.
still valuable.
It can give you some. It'll give you some energy for sure, but it'll deplete far more than it gives you. And that's because it has to. Right? So that's where, when we look at that, okay, so social media. Yeah, that was a energy depletion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was it physical energy? No. Mental and emotional, psychological? Yeah. Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
And so, for example, for me, there's between years, there's school,
mm-hmm.
there's internship. Those are all pretty much full-time things. Those are all great. I have blessings, not burdens
mm-hmm.
in those, but those are still an energy spend.
Yeah.
And so for ourselves, if we look at that and say, there's only so much you can do from the threat environment
mm-hmm.
as well. You can't control coronavirus. You can't control economic restrictions. You can't control any of that stuff. That threat arguably didn't go anywhere. You just had more energy to deal with it. Or at a minimum, you stopped some bleeding.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, like when we stop hemorrhaging
mm-hmm.
mental and emotional energy, we give ourselves a fighting chance. And that's where people are like, I'm stuck. It's like, okay, plug those holes, put those tourniquets on, stop hemorrhaging some mental and emotional energy. Yeah. That's first. Right. And could that be, I need to journal more, I need to work out more, those are all possibilities. Mm-hmm. But first it's, let's do an assessment. Let's mm-hmm. triage this thing, and we'll start with emotional. Yeah. We'll start with mental and emotional. Yeah. We'll say that. Everything else, the tactics and the strategies.
Well, yeah, and what I think most people do is they go to those tactics and strategies first, but they didn't really address the other, and then it just becomes doing more shit and doing it in a way that's just bleeding out energy.
Yeah. So do that audit. That was something that last month or a couple weeks ago at a club, a private client do, and it was like, wow. And it was a big thing. And that's not a revolutionary thing. Anybody who's done an accounting before knows it's a T account. Yeah.
What's
cash.
Going out, what's coming in.
Where's it coming in, where's it going out, right? So you conduct that and be honest with yourself and take the time for it. And again, suspend the judgment of, mm-hmm. well, this is in the gives me account because it's a good thing and I like it. Like, look at that from a different perspective. And then you, I think, can also, in doing that, I think you connect to your intuition a little bit better, mm-hmm. and you kind of catch yourselves where then you're like, oh, yeah, I know what the right answer is. Mm-hmm. Like you don't have to read a book on the perils of social media.
Right.
To know, right? You're not convincing yourself of that. So, I think that's obviously a big thing.
Yeah. I like that. The audit. Well, short podcast today, just kind of update and little sort of putting a pin and flag and kind of.
What? Putting a pin in a flag?
No, I just mean I don't know what I mean.
Okay. We'll edit this out. We'll have the sound engineer repurpose that clip for the blooper reel.
So let us know how the audio was.
Yeah.
And we'll be excited to bring a guest next one. So if you're tired of hearing us, tune back in.
All right.
Bye.